Greetings, hello, howdy. My name is Brent, and we are at Cerro Gordo, California. And this week, we are going to talk about something very near and dear to my heart, Cerro Gordo. This week is all about the history here. So, the people who built this town, who lived here, who died here, who came here as dreamers, and the history is why I bought this town. It's why I love this town. It's probably why you're watching this video. And it's an important town. You know, this town was once the largest producer of silver for the state of California. It was the reason that Los Angeles is what it is today. And so there's a very rich history here. So, to put together the video this week, I read a lot of books. And luckily, Cerro Gordo was pretty well documented through the years. There's a number of books that at least mention them. So if you're interested, stick around to the end of this video. I'm gonna give an individual bibliography or recommendations about books related to Cerro Gordo. I have to thank Roger and Cecil Vargo. They wrote a book called Cerro Gordo's Images of America. They are the ones that provided the old images for this. So thank you guys for everything, including the images. Something to note about this video. I have been working on it for a very long time. So you're gonna see me in various levels of beard, different seasons. I've been probably working on this thing since April. So long, in fact, that I recorded some of this video in the American Hotel, which, you know, is part of Cerro Gordo's history itself now. So this video means a lot to me. The history here at Cerro Gordo means a lot to me. It's a very heavy responsibility, I feel, to the history of this town and making sure that that's preserved and that people know about it. Hope you like this video. You're gonna see various stages of me in it. Without further ado. Hello from the chapel / movie theater here at Cerro Gordo. This is a building that has beautiful stained glass from a Steve McQueen movie, these movie theater seats. And this wasn't originally a chapel or movie theater. It was a mechanic's garage. It's actually a pit underneath this floor where they used to service some of the vehicles up here. And so I thought what I wanted to do is kind of give a little bit of the history of Cerro Gordo. To the best of my knowledge, I think it's one of those places where myth and fact merge together and you sift through that and you get as close as you can to the facts. But it's a mining town, you know, this is a American West. It's not gonna be perfect history, but it's gonna be the history to the best of my knowledge. And so let's get into it. All right. An important note, kind of as I start this video, is that this is the history of Cerro Gordo as a mining town. Obviously, this land existed before it was a mine, and at that time, the indigenous population out here was the Paiute. And in the years preceding the founding of Cerro Gordo as a mining town, from about 1850 to 1866 or so, there was a devastating war, essentially, down in Owens Valley between the settlers and the indigenous Paiute. To my knowledge, the connection that I found between this land specifically, so Cerro Gordo as a town core, and the Paiute is that there's two main stories. That Pablo Flores, the Mexican prospector that founded the town, either A, came up here with two companions and the two companions were killed by the Paiute, Flores ran off, came back later and started mining, or B, that Flores was actually led here by a Paiute guide who led him to the silver deposits here, and that's how Cerro Gordo started. I don't know definitively which one of those it is. If you're interested, the story of Inyo goes pretty well into the story of the Paiute and the settlers' conflict. There's probably 200 pages in here about it. I will leave that to you to discover further, but that's just a side note as we get into this thing. This is mainly Cerro Gordo as a mining town. 1865, Pablo Flores, Mexican prospector, came up here. Flores was able to set up a small scale operation up here and get about 1.5 tons of ore every 12 hours. And the ore spread to the surrounding area. And the next year in 1866, it attracted the attention of a guy named Victor Beaudry. And Beaudry came up here, he was a French-Canadian merchant, and he set up the first store in Cerro Gordo in 1866. That general store is what I'm sitting in right now. And Beaudry was one of the first ones to start realizing that this town was going to be more than it was. You know, he realized that there was a demand here, that this town is going to continue to grow. So he invested in the general store and a number of other buildings around the property. And a couple of years later, he teamed up with Mortimer Belshaw, the man, the myth, the legend that owns the house just across the street from the store. And Belshaw was a titan of his day. You know, he was the one that owned the road, he owned almost everything. And he really was a big part of why Cerro Gordo became what it became. He brought the very first load of silver into Los Angeles in 1869. He went to San Francisco, got an investment from the head paper company up there, and just brought the production here to the next level. He also created the first road up here, the Yellow Grade Road. So he would charge them a quarter, come here or going. He bought into the general store, and he also owned a lot of the mining claims. So in a lot of ways, he was almost the Jeff Bezos of Cerro Gordo. You know, he got you coming up the road, leaving the road, on the silver, on the general store, pretty much anything involved with Cerro Gordo, Mortimer Belshaw was involved with. By 1869, the silver in Cerro Gordo became so important to the town of Los Angeles that the local paper said, what Los Angeles is mainly due to it. It is the silver core that binds our present existence. Should it be uncomfortably severed, we would inevitably collapse. Also in 1869, Remy Nadeau got involved in Cerro Gordo. And Remy Nadeau is known as the king of the desert freighters. He was basically the guy that would put together the mule teams to get any of the stuff from the mines to the major cities. So he would put together 90 mule teams or 20 mule teams. And then a couple years later in 1873, he actually teamed up with the owners of Cerro Gordo, so Belshaw, Nadeau, and the others, to create the Cerro Gordo Freighting Company. By 1873, the Cerro Gordo Freighting Company had over 1,000 mules, 90 wagons, and was just coming and going every day between Los Angeles and these mountains. And Nadeau kind of parlayed his earnings from the freighting company into Los Angeles. You know, he built the first luxury hotel in Los Angeles. It still stands today. You know, his name is on a lot of the streets in Los Angeles. Belshaw also has streets in Los Angeles. Cerro Gordo Street is even in Los Angeles. So the clues are there if you look for them about how important this town was to the history of Los Angeles. So to give you an idea of kind of the type of place it was in its heyday, here's a couple news articles from 1873. The first one from November 6th says, pistols continue to crack and good men go down before them, as though neither law nor society valued men's life any more than those of many wild animals. And then the next week, this makes 5 men, 4 killed outright in this county in as many weeks. And then 2 months later, the editor had to change it to 7 men in 7 weeks. So there's basically a murder per week up here. And after the 7th murder, the editor wrote this: these lawless ruffians, side note, ruffian, great word. These lawless ruffians who with murder in their hearts and the implements of death strapped upon their persons, congregate in public places, ever ready to discharge their death-dealing weapons upon the unoffending and unarmed citizens. Some of my other favorite stories from that time that kind of illustrates what type of town it was is when they were trying to get a doctor to come up here, you know, and so they convinced this young doctor to come up, and on his very first day here, he just encountered so much that he left. So he packed his bags and left. And on the way down the hill, he ran into a newspaper reporter and he said, my friend, I came here to buy a stock of drugs and practice medicine, but damn me if I want an interest in a shooting gallery. And so basically, he was tired of having so many gunfights happening around him. Then they convinced another doctor to come up here, and he came, and his very first patient, there's a report in the newspaper where basically he went to see his first patient, and the patient that he found had lined his bed with sandbags 6 feet tall. So to access the patient, he had to climb over the sandbags with a ladder and down in. And the reason the patient did that was to stop all the stray bullets that were flying through the town in the middle of the night. It's just crazy stuff. And then the same doctor, there's another fun story, where basically he decided to go and take one of his companions to one of the brothels here. And as he was there, his friend asked what the name of one of the women at the brothel was, and the doctor replied, the Horned Toad. Overhearing this, she drew a stiletto and was about to stab the doctor when the Fenian, another woman at the brothel, grabbed her wrist. Then one of the Horned Toad's friends came after the doctor with a knife. A prominent local man, George Snow, drew his revolver and shot the man dead. The shooting became general, the room filled with smoke, the lights went out, and the doctor's young friend left the dance hall in Cerro Gordo. When George Snow was brought before the Justice of Peace for the hearing, his honor concluded, the court fines you $30, and if this fine is not paid in 30 days, you will go to security. And basically, every night there were shootings at these brothels. You know, you have to figure these were miners that were working 12 hours days underground, would come up and go to one of the many brothels or saloons here and solve their issues with gunfight. Another really important incident in Cerro Gordo's history was what some refer to as the China Stope incident, and which we've covered in other videos, but essentially in the 1870s, a part of the 200 level of the Union Mine collapsed, trapping up to 30 Chinese miners, and they were never able to recover them. And it's sad, and what's sad to me is when the newspaper reported it later, they said somewhere between 15 and 30 miners. And how you can not know how many miners died was indicative of the time, right? This was 1865. This was, the Civil War ended that year, right? Lincoln was shot that year. It was a different America then. And that's part of Cerro Gordo's history, you know? It's not something you can shy away from. There was a Chinatown here, you know? They had a lot of Chinese workers were the men who brought the ore out of Cerro Gordo's mines, and they had to live in a different part of town. And it wasn't fair. It wasn't unique to Cerro Gordo. This was, you know, if you look at America in general in 1865, it was an unfair place, but there's a huge Chinese population related to Cerro Gordo, and I hope to celebrate that. You know, there is part of the museum here with a lot of the artifacts that I find from Chinatown. It's something that we won't, you know, whitewash or wash over, but it's a wrinkle in Cerro Gordo's past. It's a complicated place. These were complicated people, but it's something that happened here, and I think any telling of story would be incomplete without at least mentioning it. In 1871, this hotel was built. So the American Hotel was constructed, and it was the finest hotel in California at the time. It's a hotel that there's rumors that Butch Cassidy hid out here in his early years. You know, it's one that even today is the oldest standing hotel in California east of the Sierras. And so it's an important hotel, and it's one that a lot of different interesting people came through, and it was a hit. You know, downstairs was a chow hall where miners would come in after a long day, eat food, fraternize, and upstairs there was a number of rooms. There was a large room that was bunk beds, that was for shared accommodation, and then 3 private rooms upstairs. It was known as the finest hotel west of the Mississippi, and it stood for many, many years, had many, many guests. You know, tragically, we lost the hotel this year. 6 years after the town was founded. 149th birthday on June 15th, 2020. It burned because of an electrical fire. And so at this point in time, if we're recounting Cerro Gordo history as of December 2020, there is no hotel. Hopefully if you look back at this video, and even in a year's time, there will be a new American hotel on the exact same site as the old one. And if you're watching this in 100 years time, if video is still a thing, hopefully that hotel is an infamous hotel that's had a number of infamous bandits, well, maybe not bandits, but interesting people staying at it as well. So the American Hotel is a big part of Cerro Gordo. It was kind of the heartbeat, the town core. And right now we're getting by without it, but hoping that, you know, in a very short order, thanks to a lot of your guys' help, that hotel is standing again. And this period of no American hotel at Cerro Gordo is just a very minor piece of the history extending from here. In 1874 alone, Cerro Gordo delivered more than $2 million worth of minerals to Los Angeles, and that was in 1874 dollars. 3,400 tons of supplies are brought into Cerro Gordo every year, and the town's population grew to more than 4,000 residents. So it had bloomed from, you know, not even 10 years before being a sleepy town that was producing 1.5 tons every 12 hours to 4,500 people living here. Hundreds of buildings. There was weddings here. There was families that moved up here. There's obviously a lot of murders that happened here, but it became the boom town. And Belshaw himself was known as he was a little bit of a gangster back in the day. There was lawsuits that brought before him where somebody had a claim to Cerro Gordo, and if they would have paid some back owed taxes in Bishop by a certain date, then they would have claimed the main Union mine. And Belshaw got word of this, and when the companies sent their messenger from San Francisco with a bag of gold to Bishop, the sheriff, before accepting it, which would have lost Belshaw the mine, they called Belshaw, and Belshaw told the sheriff, basically, get out of town. waited out so they can't get in by the timeline. And so I guess the sheriff said, I need to go see my horse, and he just left. And so they were never able to meet the deadline to get the property. And eventually this came to lawsuit. Obviously, you know, that wasn't the right thing to do, so it became a big trial in Inyo County. And at the trial, basically, the pivot point was if they could prove that their mine also had galena in it, as well as Belshaw's, the Belshaw would have lost claim to his mine because the previous claim was prior to his. And so it came to this stake where the judge was basically like, hey, go out, send people to try to prove that the mines are connected. And Belshaw, being the kind of guy that he is, he sent out a bunch of his guys with guns and basically said, you're not searching this land. And so the court-ordered search had to be turned around. Belshaw was found in contempt of court, but due to his power in the area, he was able to get the timeline pushed to the point where their claims expired, and he remained with the mountain. No discussion about Cerro Gordo's history would be complete without a discussion about water. Obviously, water is a huge issue at Cerro Gordo. It's been an issue for over 100 years, and it's an issue that I deal with, you know, every day. I can't wash my hands with turning on the sink, and there's all sorts of ways to fix it. But most relevant is Owens Lake. That dry lake bed directly below Cerro Gordo used to be a beautiful, huge lake. It was over 13 miles long and 9 miles across, something like 108 square miles of lake. And it was beautiful. You know, this was a place that celebrities from LA were starting to buy up land around because they figured this would be the next place. Imagine like down there, a beautiful 100 square mile lake surrounded by, you know, the Inyo Mountains on one side and then the Sierras on the other side and Mount Whitney and just all this stunning scenery. Then, starting in 1913, the water started being redirected to Los Angeles as part of the LA Aqueduct program by the Department of Water and Power. So that meant this beautiful 100 square mile lake was slowly drained. And then by 1926, Lake Owens was just a dry lake bed. And this area was without a lot of the water, which is a complicated subject and one that if you're interested in reading a lot more about, I would recommend Cadillac Desert. It's a great book. Also, if you want a more fictionalized version, if you watch Chinatown with Jack Nicholson, that movie is about the Department of Water and Power and the issues surrounding it. So I would recommend that for further reading and information. In the coming years, the price of silver plummeted and a lot of the mining operations were shut down or moved to different towns. By 1888, the town was all but abandoned with only 30 to 40 people still living here. Then, in 1911, Lewis D. Gordon found significant zinc deposits in the Union Mine and started the zinc era for Cerro Gordo. Cerro Gordo became the main zinc producer for the United States. Gordon was responsible for constructing the 2 aerial tramways that brought ore down the mountain. The zinc operations lasted until the 1930s. Gordon was also responsible for building the Gordon Mansion here that still stands today. It's kind of in the center of town, and it's one of the most beautiful buildings here on the property. So LD brought a whole nother wave of prosperity to Cerro Gordo. You know, he moved his whole family up here. The Gordon house was finished around 1910 or 1911, and he wanted to create the state-of-the-art house. That's why it looks a little bit different than the rest of the buildings here. It was built a little bit later, and he built it specifically to be state-of-the-art. So that way his wife, Cornelia, would be comfortable living up here and would want to raise their family here. The books say otherwise. She wasn't super comfortable living in a mining town. Obviously, there was a lot of gunfights and just generally rude behavior. But LD brought another 20 years of prosperity to this town. You know, till maybe 1930, the town was a boom town again. Thousands of miners moved back here. The town was kind of on the map again. And then around 1930, again, the minerals dried up and a lot of people packed up and left. And by 1945, 1947, the town is essentially abandoned again. You know, it was left to a former caretaker named Wally Wilson, who couldn't really figure out how to make a living here. So he ended up doing stuff like selling artifacts by the bucket, or he even sold the floor out of the kitchen here in the saloon, the actual wood floor, to a pharmacy in Lone Pine. I mean, that pharmacy is currently for sale, and so I kind of want to buy our wood back and bring it back up here. But that was it. You know, from 1930 on, there was pretty much a single occupant here, a caretaker or maybe a family, but The peak Cerro Gordo days ended when the zinc ran out, and ever since there's just been different families of dreamers and idealists trying to make something out of this town. In 1973, a woman named Jody Patterson came up to Cerro Gordo, and her uncle owned the town at that point, and he was in a little bit of financial stress. So she agreed to be a silent partner, and she bought 25% in 1973. And about 9 years later, she ended up purchasing the whole property. And Jody was somebody that was from Lone Pine originally. She had gone to Los Angeles and been an actress and a game show host. She was a pilot and just a generally badass woman. And she fell in love with Cerro Gordo. She moved up here pretty much full time in 1985. And along with her partner, Mike Patterson, they're our inspiration up here. You know, they put their heart and soul into this place. They cared about this town more than anybody. You know, Jody, this is actually Jody still here overlooking the town. And so, you know, whenever we're kind of struggling with a decision, sometimes I'll come up here and sit with Jody overlooking the town, just kind of reflect on the past history of Cerro Gordo. It's such a rich history as we just went through, and then what the future holds for Cerro Gordo. And I guess that brings us to today. You know, I currently own Cerro Gordo. It was purchased July 13th, 2018. Friday the 13th, which if you're gonna own a ghost town, seems like an appropriate place to start. And from day one, my goal here, my hopes are to preserve the history here. You know, I think history is why this piece of dirt is interesting, while allowing more people to come up and experience it. Meaning, I hope to eventually have overnight accommodation here. You know, I think day tours are important. People can come up for the day, look around, take a tour of the town, but I'd love for people to be able to spend the night. Just because when you spend the night here, it's such a different experience. You know, you see the way the sun is rising and hits the different peaks at different hours, and it's beautiful up here. And I think it's a bit selfish to kind of keep that to yourself. So that's the hope. You know, the first step of that will be the hotel. Hopefully summer of next year, fingers crossed, trying hard to do that. And we'll see from there. You know, over time, I'd love to offer almost every level of accommodation, from camping on the backside, very basic campsites where people can pitch a tent and just be very inexpensive, to little miners' cabins. You know, we have almost 200 acres behind the town that is heavily wooded. So I'd love to put little cabins back there. They're very basic, you know, solar, where people can come if they don't want to camp, they can stay in these cabins, all the way up to the hotel. You know, the hotel will only have 6 rooms, but hopefully they'll be fairly nice. And so that way, whatever your comfort level, there's something at Cerro Gordo for you. Because my goal, my hope, my dream is to share this place, not just on video, but in person. And so hopefully this is just a reference point for the future history of Cerro Gordo. That's what I see my job as. I see it as a chaperone, as a curator, as a custodian of the town for the brief amount of time I'm able to, you know, be here. Thank you so much for watching all these videos. It's just been so amazing to see the support for the town and the project we're trying to do. Again, I'd love to have you guys up here at some point, but for now, please subscribe to this channel. It means a lot to the town. Comment below with future videos that you'd like to see. Share with friends. But generally, thanks again for all the support. And until next time, I will, I'll be here. So obviously this video is just scratching the surface of the history of Cerro Gordo. You know, my hope here was to expose you to some of the people, places, ideas, things that happened here. But if you're interested in a further dive, I will give you some recommendations. First, the book I recommend the most is a book that I can't even find, but it's Roger and Cecil Vargo's book, Images of America's Cerro Gordo. I'll try to put it here as an image, but the book is great. It shows photos of Cerro Gordo through the years with a great explanation of it. I recommend it the most. Number 2 is the book that I put into the time capsule. It's called From This Hill by Robert C. Likes, and it's got an orange cover. You can maybe find it on Amazon, but look up Robert C. Likes and Cerro Gordo. That is a very good book as well. Highly recommend. Next, I would say Silver Seekers. Super cool book. This book is written by Remy Nadeau, who, interestingly enough, as you just learned, was a very big part of Cerro Gordo's history. And this is written by his great-great-grandson, who is a prolific writer, and I'm gonna recommend a lot of his books, but Silver Seekers would be next. I recommend. I really like The Story of Inyo. This goes over the history of the entire county out here, which is very interesting. Cerro Gordo was obviously a big part of the county. So Story of Inyo would be next. Boys in the Sky Blue Pants. This is about the area out here. It isn't necessarily just about Cerro Gordo, but it has a lot of cool tidbits in it. So I would recommend checking out that if you're interested. Another by Remy Nadeau would be Ghost Towns and Mining Camps of California. Looks like this. It's very cool, not just about Cerro Gordo, but about the whole mining scene out here. So recommend that. If we move away from just related to Cerro Gordo to more like the area of Inyo County and the Sierras, I would say Women of the Sierra is very interesting. It talks about some of the badass women that, you know, were out here in the mid 1800s. So that is a very good book to check out. The Water Seekers, also by Remy Nadeau, worth checking out. Los Angeles, From Mission to Modern City by Remy Nadeau, also worth it. Cerro Gordo is why Los Angeles is what it is today, and this book shows you why, so I recommend that. City Makers, similar thing. Remy Nadeau talks about a bunch of guys that were up here. And finally, as I already mentioned, if you're interested in the water situation, Cadillac Desert is very interesting. And actually, not to be forgotten, Robert Damaris, who is the caretaker here for 20 years and still comes around every once in a while, wrote a book called The Journal of Lost Mine Canyon. It's a fictionalized version of his story up in the mountains and mining. It's available in our store. Check it out. And that's it. That's my suggested reading list related to Cerro Gordo. If you have any other suggestions, put them in the comments below. Thank you guys as always for checking out this video. I'm gonna see you next week.